The Blackwood Secret. A rusted metal box. A pregnancy test dated 1994. One sentence that would shatter everything Elena knew. She can't find out. The child is ours, not hers. 13 hours earlier, the afternoon had been ordinary. Dust motes floating through the attic window of Blackwood Estate, the kind of drowsy, golden light that makes you forget why you came looking in the first place. Elena had gone up there searching for old Christmas decorations. Her mother, Martha, had asked for the vintage porcelain nativity set, the one that hadn't been unpacked in years. The attic stairs creaked under her leather boots, the old wood groaning its familiar complaint. She navigated the maze of trunks and furniture, her eyes adjusting to the shadows. Somewhere in this accumulated chaos of the family's past was what she'd been sent to find. The warped oak floorboard caught her boot mid-stride. One moment of carelessness, her weight shifting onto a board that had been swollen and weakened by decades of moisture. And the floor gave way beneath her. Her arms flew out, desperately reaching for anything solid. Her fingertips scraped the rough cedar trunk as her body pitched forward. Sharp wood groan, the sound of her own heart thumping in her ears like something trying to escape her chest. She landed hard, hands braced against the wooden floor, breathing ragged. For a moment she stayed there, knees bent, processing the shock. The dust around her seemed to glow in the late afternoon light, streaming through the attic window. Thousands of particles suspended in golden air, each one marking the stirred remains of forgotten years. The loose board lay crooked beside her, one end still attached by a single stubborn nail, the other edge jutting up at an angle. And beneath it, darkness. A rectangular hollow carved between the floor joists, the kind of space where old houses kept their secrets. Elena knelt and worked her fingers under the edge of the board. She pried upward, her jaw clenched with effort. The wood shrieked as the nails surrendered, one by one. Inch by inch, the board came free, revealing the cavity beneath. Dark, dust-filled, waiting. She reached in without thinking. Her hand closed around something solid. Metal. Cold. Rusted. The tin box came out of the hole with a scraping sound that seemed to echo through the entire attic. Dirt fell from its edges. The metal was stained deep orange with rust, covered in a fading floral pattern. Roses, maybe, once brightly painted. She turned it over in her hands. The rust came off on her fingers, leaving iron stains on her skin. The latch was stiff. She worked her thumb against it, feeling it resist, then suddenly give with a sharp snap. The lid popped open. Inside, a plastic pregnancy test strip, yellowed with age. 2 faint pink lines. Beneath it, a scrap of paper with a date written in faded pencil, 1994. Elena's breath caught. She stared at the test without touching it. Below that, a letter. She unfolded it carefully, the yellowed paper crackling. The handwriting was aggressive, slanted, the black ink still dark after so many years. She read the words slowly, feeling them land like blows. Thomas, she can't find out. The child is ours, not hers. The signature at the bottom. Just an initial. M. Her mother's initial. Elena stood abruptly, her legs unsteady. The letter trembled in her hands. The dust that had seemed so golden moments before now felt suffocating, each particle a weight pressing down on her lungs. She turned toward the attic stairs. The box clutched against her ribs, her mind already racing ahead to questions she didn't want to ask. Footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Fast. Julian appeared in the attic doorway, blocking the way out. He was tall and lean, dressed in his usual dark clothes, his face composed in an expression of mild concern that didn't reach his eyes. "What do you have there, Elena?" he said, his voice careful, measured. Grandpa said the attic was off limits. The question hung in the air between them like a physical thing. Elena moved instinctively toward the door, the box still under her arm. She wasn't thinking, just moving, just trying to get past him. Julian lunged. His hands grabbed for the box, but Elena spun away, her shoulders slamming against the wall with a dull thud that drove the air from her lungs. Julian caught her forearm, his fingers squeezing hard, his knuckles turning white with effort. She felt the blood in her arm slow under the pressure. "Get off me, Julian." The words came out as a shout, surprising them both with their violence. Elena drove her knee upward into his thigh, putting all her weight into the movement. She felt it connect. Julian grunted, a sound of genuine pain, and his grip on her arm loosened. She shoved him backward with her free hand, using the momentum of her spin. Julian staggered backward down the first 3 steps, his arms flailing for the railing. He caught it, saved himself from falling further, and turned back to face her with rage, twisting his features into something she didn't recognize. His lips pulled back from his teeth. A vein stood out at his temple. He swung a wild punch that whistled past her ear so close she felt the air move. It cracked against the wooden door frame behind her, and wood splinters exploded outward, a spray of ivory-colored shards. The impact cracked the frame. Elena didn't wait. She bolted down the stairs, leaping over the last 3 steps entirely, landing hard on the hallway rug below. Her ankles screamed, but she was already running, already moving toward the kitchen, already pulling away from the sounds of pursuit. Her footsteps echoed through the hallway of the Blackwood estate, rooms full of portraits and mahogany furniture passing by in a blur. She burst into the kitchen, her breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The space was all white marble and steel, pristine and cold. Elena slammed the rusted box onto the marble island. The lid bounced open from the impact, spilling the letters across the white stone surface like a confession. "Explain this," Elena said, her voice cut crystal sharp. "Now." Martha stood in the doorway to the sunroom, a teacup frozen halfway to her lips. The color drained from her face, a sickly, waxy gray that happened all at once, like someone had opened a valve and let all her blood drain into the floor. She set the cup down on the counter with trembling fingers. Her hand went to her throat, to the pearl necklace she always wore, and she clutched it until the string looked ready to snap. "You had no right to go up there," Martha whispered. But there was no power in the words. No denial, no surprise even. Only shame, thick and choking. Elena shoved the pregnancy test toward her, sliding it across the marble with enough force that it spun. 1994, Mom. You were traveling that year. You were in Prague. You told me you were in Prague. So who is M? Who actually wrote these letters to Dad? Martha's eyes darted to the doorway. She drew a sharp, ragged breath that sounded like a sob before it came out. "It wasn't an affair, Elena." Martha's voice was barely audible. "It was a transaction. You weren't supposed to be found." The words landed in the kitchen like a stone dropped down a well. Elena heard the ringing in her ears, a high-pitched, insistent sound that seemed to come from inside her own head. Everything in the kitchen suddenly seemed too sharp, too defined. The edge of the marble island, the glint of the refrigerator handle, her own reflection in the counter's polished surface, distorted and strange. Martha continued, words pouring out now like something poisoned that had to be expelled. "I did it to save you," she said, her voice breaking. "She was going to leave you in that car. She was an addict, Elena. She couldn't take care of you. Your father's sister, she called us desperate. Said if we didn't take you, she was going to abandon you. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let my sister-in-law destroy a child's life." Elena felt the world tilt. Not metaphorically, physically tilt. The room seemed to spin slightly, gravity shifting. She gripped the edge of the marble island. Her biological mother wasn't the woman who had raised her. The family she had always known was a constructed thing, a lie built on lies, layer upon layer of deception. She wasn't Elena Blackwood. She was someone else entirely. A child purchased like a used car. A problem solved with cash and signatures. Martha reached toward her. Please, please understand. Everything I did was for you. Elena pulled away from the counter and turned. She didn't know what she was looking for. The door, the stairs, anything that would take her away from this kitchen and this woman and these impossible truths. She moved through the halls of the Blackwood estate like a ghost, passing through familiar rooms that had suddenly become foreign. Nothing made sense. Nothing was real. The driveway, her car. She had to get away from this place. Rain had begun to fall while they were inside. Heavy, insistent rain. Elena wrenched her car door open, and the rain hit her face like a slap. The windshield was already streaming with water. She fumbled the key into the ignition with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else. Trembling, disconnected from her brain, she could hear her own ragged breathing over the sound of the rain and the engine turning over. The headlights appeared in her rearview mirror before she heard the engine. Thomas. Her father. No, not her father. The man she had called father all her life. He was driving the heavy SUV, the one with the bull bar on the front. He was driving it fast, the engine roaring, the headlights blinding her as he came down the driveway. He swerved and angled the vehicle across the main gate, blocking the iron bars with the SUV's frame. Elena threw the car into reverse and stamped on the accelerator. Gravel exploded under her tires, the sound like gunfire. She J-turned into the narrow dirt path that led toward the woods, away from the gate, away from the SUV. The car fishtailed wildly, her tires losing purchase on the wet ground for one terrifying moment before catching again. She gunned the engine. The impact came from behind, a massive crunch of metal. Thomas had followed her off the pavement. His SUV rammed her rear bumper, and the force of it jarred Elena's head back against the headrest hard enough to see stars. Her hands flew involuntarily on the steering wheel. The car swerved toward a tree line before she corrected, her windshield wipers struggling uselessly against the deluge. "Stop it!" The scream tore from her throat. Thomas hit her again. Another ram. The rear window of her car cracked but held. Elena took the next turn too fast, throwing the car into a thicket of pine trees at the edge of the property. Her side mirror caught the bark of a massive pine. Sparks flew, an impossible fountain of orange and gold light in the darkness. The mirror snapped off with a horrible groaning sound, and then she was plunging deeper into the forest. The branches whipping past her windows, and the SUV behind her couldn't follow. Too wide, too heavy. She drove deeper into the darkness, branches scraping the sides of her car until the forest swallowed the sight of the headlights behind her. Only then did she risk slowing down. Only then did her hands begin to shake too badly to grip the wheel. The motel was the kind of place that didn't ask questions. 23 minutes away from the estate, on the highway heading north toward nowhere. Two-story buildings shaped like an L, rooms painted the color of dirty dishwater. The kind of place where people rented rooms for 2 hours at a time. Elena paid cash for a room on the second floor, $47, and the woman at the desk didn't even look up from her phone. The room smelled like industrial cleaner, trying unsuccessfully to cover other, darker smells. The bed had a cheap synthetic comforter in a shade of beige that had never existed in nature. Elena sat on the edge of it, fully clothed, still damp from the rain. She showered mechanically, as if the act of being clean might somehow reset the day. Wash away the lies, the revelations, the terrible truth that she had been bought. It didn't work. She was standing in the room, drying her hair with a thin white towel, when the envelope slid under the door. She saw it moving, a white envelope, pristine and unmarked, pushing across the worn carpet with deliberate slowness. Elena froze, the towel still held to her head. She heard nothing. No footsteps, no car door. Just the envelope, sliding across the carpet with agonizing slowness, until it stopped in the middle of the floor. Elena lunged for the door, tearing it open. The hallway was empty, a long corridor of numbered doors, fluorescent lights casting everything in a sickly green tinge. One bulb flickered at the far end, strobing darkness and light alternately. She heard a heavy door slam somewhere downstairs. By the time she stepped into the hallway, whoever had left the envelope was gone. She was alone in the corridor, listening to the hum of the ice machine somewhere below and the distant sound of a television through a wall. She brought the envelope inside and locked the door behind her. The paper inside was cold. Official. A DNA test report from Gene Trust Labs. Elena's eyes moved across the text, scanning rapidly until they found the results. Probability of paternity, 0.000%. Not Thomas. Not biologically connected at all. The numbers confirmed what the letters had already told her. She was adopted, purchased, taken in as a solution to someone else's problem. She sank onto the bed, the report trembling in her hands. There was a second item in the envelope. A photograph, grainy and time-worn, printed on cheap paper from a long-gone era. It showed Martha, younger, slimmer, but unmistakably Martha, standing in a hospital corridor with a woman who looked exactly like Elena. Not similar, exactly like. Same cheekbones, same dark hair, same angle of the jaw. Martha was handing the woman a thick stack of cash. The date was printed on the back, 04/12/1995, 4 months after the pregnancy test. Elena stared at the photo until the room began to spin. They bought me. The thought arrived fully formed, like something she had always known, but had never quite allowed herself to think. She turned the photo over, expecting nothing, and found handwriting on the back. Blue ink, neat and precise. I'm not the villain. I'm the one who kept you safe. Julian. She read it twice, 3 times. The letters rearranged themselves, but meant the same thing. Julian had left this envelope. Julian, who had tried to grab the box from her. Julian, who had blocked the attic door. Julian had been following her all day, had tracked her to this motel, had slid this envelope under her door. Why would he do that? What did he want? Elena didn't sleep. She sat on the motel bed with all the lights on, the television playing without sound, waiting for something she couldn't name. Somewhere around 2 a.m., she heard footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside her door. She held her breath. The window exploded inward. A heavy boot came through the glass, shattering it into 1,000 pieces that flew across the room like diamonds catching neon light. Elena dived off the bed as the boot was pulled back out, and a figure in a dark hoodie forced their way through the window opening. She ran for the door, but the figure, already through the window, already moving, tackled her before she got 3 feet. They hit the bed together, a tangle of limbs and fury. The mattress springs screamed as they rolled across it. Elena clawed at the hooded face, her fingernails connecting with nothing but fabric and air. The figure was larger than her, stronger, and moved with the kind of cold efficiency that came from purpose. The nightstand lamp was right there. Elena grabbed it and swung it with everything she had. The ceramic base connected with the intruder's head with a sickening thud. The light bulb shattered. The cord snapped. Dust exploded from the broken ceramic. The figure staggered backward, clutching their head. Elena kicked, a two-footed kick that drove them backward into the open railing of the balcony. The momentum carried them over. There was a grunt of impact below. Then the sound of someone hitting asphalt. Elena leaned over the railing, chest heaving, hyperventilating into the night. Below, beneath the flickering street light, a figure got up and limped into the trees. Even in the darkness, even with the limp, she recognized the silhouette. Julian. "You liar," she choked out. But he was already gone, disappearing into the shadows, like he had never been there at all. She didn't think. She just acted. She packed everything she owned into the bag she had brought. Clothes, keys, the letters, the DNA report. She left money for the broken window on the nightstand. She didn't look back. She pointed the car north and drove until she saw the sign for the town records office. The building was dark when she arrived. Pre-dawn blue light making everything look like something seen underwater. She drove around back and found the basement window. The kind of window that locks were often forgotten on. She had a crowbar in the car from before the crash, still tucked under the seat. She used it to pry the latch open. The metal groaned and the latch snapped. She slid through the opening, landing on a pile of old newspapers that made a soft, cushioned landing. The basement smelled like mold and old paper. She found the stairs and moved upward through the dark building, her eyes gradually adjusting. Emergency lighting cast everything in shades of gray. She moved through file rooms, past desks, searching for the archives. Records from 1995. Birth certificates, adoption papers. Something that would prove who she actually was. The archive room was on the 3rd floor. Filing cabinets lined the walls, floor to ceiling. She moved to the section marked 1995 and began opening drawers, pulling out files, scanning for her name. Elena Blackwood. But that wasn't her name. Not really. She didn't know her real name. She didn't know. The flashlight beam cut through the darkness like a knife. Thomas emerged from behind the cabinets, silhouetted against his own light. He was holding a heavy maglite, and he swung it with methodical intent at the glass desk where Elena had been searching. The glass exploded, shards scattering across the floor like 1,000 tiny mirrors. "You shouldn't have come here, Elena. This was buried for a reason," Thomas said, his voice a growl that echoed through the archive room. Elena threw the nearest thing she could find, a heavy metal file drawer. She put her weight into it, using her legs for leverage, and the drawer flew across the space and caught Thomas's knees. He stumbled. Elena attacked, tackling him into a row of steel filing cabinets. The impact was tremendous. A loud, booming clang that echoed through the whole building like a bell struck by a hammer. They crashed to the floor together, papers scattering around them like snow. Papers that had been sealed for decades came loose and flew through the air. Thomas was stronger, but Elena was driven by something that transcended physical strength. She was driven by rage, by betrayal, by the understanding that everything she had believed about her life was a performance, a constructed narrative built on someone else's lies. Thomas grabbed her by the throat, his hand large and brutal. He lifted her off the ground, slamming her against the filing cabinets. Metal dented. The sound was hollow and terrible. Elena kicked, her feet dangling, her hands clawing at his eyes. He slammed her head back against the metal again, and stars exploded in her vision. She could feel consciousness beginning to slip, could feel the pressure in her head building, could feel her vision narrowing to a tunnel. She reached into her jacket pocket with fingers that felt numb, and her hand closed around the letter opener she had taken from the nightstand at the motel. A small thing, heavy silver, pointless except for this. She drove it into Thomas's shoulder, above the collarbone, with everything she had left. Thomas roared. The sound tore from him like something living. He let go of her throat and staggered backward. Elena dropped to the floor and rolled away, gasping for air, feeling her lungs expand painfully. She lay on the cold tile, breathing in the smell of dust and old paper. Thomas fell to his knees, his hand going to the letter opener still protruding from his shoulder. He pulled it out with a gasp of pain. Blood was spreading across his shirt, dark and wet. "I'm sorry," he said, and the words came out broken. I'm sorry. Elena pushed herself up onto her elbows, watching him. In the emergency lighting, she could see something glinting around his neck. A thin chain. A locket. It fell from his neck as he moved, dropping onto the tile floor between them. Elena reached for it. Inside was a photograph. Tiny but clear. Thomas, younger, standing with a woman who looked exactly like Elena. The same woman from the hospital corridor photo. The woman Martha had paid. His sister. Elena's biological mother. She was an addict, Thomas said, his voice rough with pain. I couldn't let my sister ruin your life. Martha couldn't have children. Your mother couldn't take care of you. It made sense. It felt like a solution to everything. And then you grew up. And then you were happy. And then it was too late to tell you the truth. Elena looked at the locket, at the photograph, at this man who had raised her, who had tried to kill her, who had orchestrated the entire trajectory of her life without her consent. She closed the locket and put it in her pocket. She stood up, her legs unsteady. She didn't look back as she walked to the window. She didn't look back as she climbed out into the pre-dawn light. She didn't look back as she got into her car and drove toward the highway. There was a ticket counter at the airport. A woman who looked at her passport without really seeing her. A boarding pass that said Elena Doe. A destination marked London. Elena walked through the terminal, wheeling a black suitcase behind her. The morning light came through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning everything white and bright and new. She could see Martha through the glass doors, small, fragile, watching, waiting for something. Reconciliation, maybe. Understanding, an explanation that would make sense of all the lies. Elena stopped at a large industrial trash bin near the security gate. She opened her bag and pulled out the rusted metal box. For a moment, she held it. Then she dropped it into the bin. It fell to the bottom with a hollow, final clatter. She pulled out the boarding pass. The new identity. New name. New life in a city she had never seen. Starting from zero. From nothing. From a blank slate that was hers and hers alone. Elena turned to face Martha across the distance. She looked her in the eye. She smiled, small, sharp, without warmth, and gave a small mock salute. Don't worry, Mom, she said, though Martha couldn't hear her across the distance and the glass. I'll send a postcard to the person I actually am. She turned and walked toward the security gate. The light ahead of her was white, brilliant, overwhelming. Her heels clicked against the tile floor, sharp, rhythmic, the sound of someone moving forward with purpose and never turning around. She didn't look back at Martha. She didn't look back at the estate or the family or the life that had been constructed around her like a cage. She walked through the gate and into the tunnel of white light, carrying only the suitcase and the boarding pass with a name that finally felt like hers. Behind her, the airport continued its ordinary chaos. The announcements, the other travelers, the machinery of transit and departure that kept the world moving. She was just one more person leaving. One more person with a suitcase and a destination. The only difference was that she was finally going somewhere that was actually hers.